They fined me for clearing their road. So I stopped, and what happened next shut down the entire neighborhood. The first letter arrived folded like it carried something heavier than paper. It wasn't just a notice, it was a warning dressed up in polite language, stamped with the authority of people who believed they controlled everything they could see. I found it tucked under my windshield wiper early in the morning, right after a long night of plowing. The snow had come down hard, one of those relentless storms that doesn't just cover the world, it buries it. By the time I'd finished clearing the main stretch of road leading into our little mountain subdivision, my back ached and my hands were still vibrating from the machine. I remember standing there in the cold, engine ticking as it cooled behind me, reading the letter twice just to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding it. Violation. Unauthorized snow track markings on community roadways. Fine, $150 per occurrence. I actually laughed at first, out loud. A sharp, disbelieving sound that vanished into the quiet white air. Snow track markings. That's what they were calling it. Not the only reason anyone could leave their house this morning. Not the difference between emergency access and total isolation. No snow tracks. I crumpled the paper slightly in my hand, then smoothed it out again. I knew exactly where it had come from. The HOA board. More specifically, the woman who ran it like a personal kingdom, Diane Mercer. Diane had moved into the neighborhood about 2 years ago and wasted no time turning it into her project. Before her, the HOA existed mostly on paper. A few guidelines, a small annual fee, nothing anyone really thought about. But Diane believed in order. She believed in rules. And most of all, she believed those rules applied to everyone except her. I'd had minor run-ins with her before, nothing serious. A complaint about the color of my shed. A warning about leaving my plow parked in my driveway. Petty things. Annoying, but manageable. This, though. This was different, because without my plow, that road she was so concerned about, it wouldn't exist in winter. I live at the far end of the subdivision, where the main paved road turns into something less official packed. Dirt, gravel, and whatever nature decides to throw on top of it. The county doesn't maintain it, never has. It's technically private, which means it falls under HOA responsibility. Except the HOA doesn't own a plow. I do. And for the past 6 winters, I've been the one clearing that road. Not because I'm paid, not because I'm required to, but because if I didn't, no one else would. Families live up here. Older folks. A couple with a newborn. A retired firefighter with a bad hip. When the snow hits, they rely on that road. Being passable. So I plow. Or at least I used to. I walked back inside that morning, boots crunching against the thin layer of ice that had already started forming again. The house was warm, the smell of coffee lingering in the air. I set the letter on the kitchen counter and stared at it for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and called the number listed at the bottom. It rang twice before someone answered. Macho, a administrative office. Yeah, I said, keeping my voice even. This is Mark Ellison. I just received a violation notice about snow track markings. I need to understand what exactly that means. There was a pause. Papers rustling. Yes, Mr. Ellison. The voice replied. That notice was issued this morning following an inspection. An inspection, I repeated. of a snow-covered road? The board has determined that the tracks left by your plowing equipment are inconsistent with the community's aesthetic standards. I blinked. You're fining me for plowing the road? You are not authorized to modify or mark shared community surfaces without prior approval. That shared surface is impassable without those tracks, I said, my patience starting to crack. People can't even get their cars out otherwise. You may submit a request for authorization at the next board meeting. I let out a slow breath. When is that? 3 weeks from now. 3 weeks. Another storm was already forecast for the weekend. So what happens in the meantime? I asked. Do we just let the road disappear? That is not within the scope of this office's responsibilities. Of course it wasn't. I looked back at the letter. The fine amount was clearly printed, and at the bottom a line that made my jaw tighten. Continued violations may result in escalating penalties. Escalating. I thank them, though I don't. Remember deciding to and hung up. For the next hour, I sat at the kitchen table, watching the snow drift lazily past the window. The world looked peaceful, quiet, like nothing was wrong, but something was, because for the first time in 6 years, I realized something very simple. They didn't want my help, and if they didn't want it, I wasn't going to force it on them. The next storm came right on schedule. It started late Friday night, a steady fall that thickened into a heavy blanket by morning. I woke up before dawn out of habit, already expecting to get the plow running. Instead, I stayed in bed. That was the hardest part, not the decision itself. I'd made that the moment I read the letter, but the breaking of routine, the instinct to get up, gear up, and head out. I lay there, listening to the wind push against the house, and did nothing. By mid-morning, my phone started buzzing. First it was Tom, the retired firefighter. "Hey, Mark," he said when I answered. "You heading out soon? It's getting pretty deep out here." "I'm not plowing this time," I told him. There was a pause. "What? Why not?" I explained. The letter, the fine, the warning. Tom swore under his breath. "You've got to be kidding me." I wish I was. So what are we supposed to do? I looked out the window again. The snow was already piling up faster than it had during the last storm. "I guess that's a question for the HOA. I said. Word spread quickly after that. By noon, I'd gotten calls and messages from half the neighborhood. Some were confused. Some were frustrated. A few were angry, but not at me. Everyone knew what the road would look like without the plow. By evening, it was already happening. Cars that had tried to leave were stuck halfway down the stretch. Tires spun uselessly in the deepening snow. A delivery truck had turned around before even attempting it. And Diane? She hadn't said a word. Saturday morning, the road was gone. Not just covered, gone. Buried under nearly 2 feet of snow, with drifts higher in some places where the wind had pushed it into uneven ridges. The path that had once been clear, defined by the tracks of my plow, was now just another part of the landscape. White, unbroken, impassable. I stepped outside and walked a few yards down it, just to see. Each step sank deep. My boots disappeared almost to the knee. I turned back after a minute, shaking my head. There was no way through that without heavy equipment. My heavy equipment. Around midday, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find 3 people standing. There Tom, a young couple from halfway up the road, and behind them, Diane. She was dressed impeccably, as always, even in the middle of a snowstorm. Long coat, gloves, not a hair out of place. But her expression was tight, controlled. "Mr. Ellison," she said. "Diane, we need to discuss the current situation." I leaned against the doorframe. "Seems pretty clear to me. This road is inaccessible," she said. "Yeah, that tends to happen when it snows." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You are responsible for maintaining it." "No," I replied calmly. "I'm not. You have been performing that function for years, voluntarily." She took a step forward. "And now you've chosen to stop without notice, leaving the entire community stranded." I almost smiled at that. "Funny," I said. "I remember getting a notice about how my plowing was a violation. That notice referred to unauthorized alterations." "Tracks," I interrupted. "You fined me for tracks." Tom shifted. Beside her. "Diane, come on. You know he's the only one who can clear this." She ignored him, her focus still on me. "If you resume plowing immediately, the board may be willing to reconsider the fine." "Maybe?" I echoed. "It will depend on your compliance moving forward." I shook my head slowly. "No." That seemed to catch her off guard, just for a second. "No?" she repeated. "You made it pretty clear," I said. "My work isn't welcome, so I'm done." "You're being unreasonable, and you're being consistent," I replied. "You enforced the rules. I'm respecting them." The young couple exchanged a glance. The woman looked like she was about to say something, then thought better of it. Diane's composure started to crack at the edges. "This is not a game. Mr. Ellison, there are safety concerns." "Emergency access." "Exactly," I said. "All the things I've been taking care of. For free." Silence settled between us, heavy as the snow outside. Finally, Tom spoke up. "Diane, we don't have time for this. We need the road cleared." She hesitated. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked uncertain. Then she turned back to me. "What will it take?" she asked. I considered that for a moment, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I wanted to make sure she understood it. "No more fines," I said. "No more violations for doing what needs to be done. And if I'm going to keep maintaining that road, it's on my terms." "And those are?" "A written agreement," I said, "acknowledging that I'm authorized to plow, that the HOA won't interfere, and that if they ever decide to enforce their aesthetic standards again, they can find someone else to dig them out." Diane's jaw tightened. "That is highly irregular. So is finding the only person keeping your road usable." Another long pause. The wind howled faintly outside, rattling something loose in the distance. Finally she nodded, once sharp. "I'll need board approval." "Then you'd better get it fast," I said, "because this storm isn't done yet." They left shortly after that. I watched them struggle back up the buried road, each step a reminder of exactly what the situation was. And for the first time since that letter appeared on my windshield, I felt completely at peace, because the road hadn't just disappeared under the snow. It had taken their control with it.